Okay, here we are. Oh no, I don't have Cole. Cole, I lost you. There you are.
I am.
You're flashing for me. Oh no. Okay, there we are. I've figured out my buttons. Hi everyone. Welcome to our these have become annual streams, Cole. We're doing them
I
annually
suppose
now. Yeah, but
it's a tradition.
our tradition to get together in the first part of the year to talk about what Wehrlegig has in store, which is exciting. And we have a lot of stuff planned, right?
Yeah, we do. We had, this is a good kind of tradition because it's sort of like I think Drew and I both love I'd say top two holidays, top three, New Year's Day,
Yeah,
for
these are
both
good
of us.
holidays. Yes.
And I think you and I both like the idea of like a new year, a turned leaf, some kind of like
Yeah.
not that we're turning any leaves, but just we are making some statements about what we want to get done in the year. We don't
Yeah.
like to we don't want to have it just slide by. I'm not cynical about New Year's Day,
No,
New
no,
Year's
but this is good
resolutions.
for, especially for us as a project where it's primarily you and I. This is like a moment for us to set our own expectations of ourselves,
Right.
right?
Right. Well, and also we did this last year because we were getting ready to like try something out that
Yeah,
we had never done before. And we've learned a ton about how we work and about the sorts of projects that we want to be working on. Um, so at this time last year, like John Company had just come out. It had come out in the
right.
fall. And we were at that point like I don't know, maybe 4 months in. Well, that's not true. We have been working on a bunch of projects while John Company was finishing up. Um, but this is a
Yeah, this is
we're-
we get to just have a little moment to reflect on like a year of experimentation and then talk about more weird experiments
yes, yeah,
that get to
exactly.
come up.
Yeah, we learned a lot, and we're going to continue experimenting. The
Mhm.
experimentation is not over.
Yeah, if there were more clearly evidently uh there's nothing more evident than having a crowdfunding campaign that makes us feel emboldened to like keep on doing things like this. So having everything lead up to the Molly House campaign, like doing so well, so that it allowed
Mhm.
us to take a risk on this project and also afford so much time for us to work on this on Molly
Yeah,
House over the last few months too. Has been great.
yeah, no, it's been amazing. So, well, what we're gonna do, this is won't be that long of a stream. We'll be
Yeah,
hanging out for a while. We're happy to take questions from the crew
yeah.
as we get into things. We want to start by talking a little bit about last year.
Yeah, let's Cole, let's jump over and actually let's talk about I think the best way to talk about last year is actually to talk about the our conventions. Is that
Right.
fair, right? So let's get right into it and let's talk about the conventions that we did and that we are going to do again. So Whirligig we had our first booth at PAX Unplugged in December, and it was incredible to have our own space, to just like
Yeah,
have a
it
space
was
on the
great.
floor. Was amazing. I think it felt like compounding like anxieties to keep me away from wanting to have done that before. And it was nice to get on ahead of them and to actually put our games out there in that way, because that was the first time that we've ever brought PAX or John Company or Molly House to a convention.
And we
Like
had
not in
done
a
like a
backpack.
yeah, we had like done a lot of shows before. John Ritter back when he was with Lay Waste Games would sell Premiere on like the floor of Gen
Yeah,
Con back kind of in the earlier years. And then we did even this year, we went to UK Games Expo and got to sort of scout it out and Drew and I have done Essen and things like that before. But Unplugged was different. Unplugged was um an experiment where Drew put together a fabulous booth
yeah.
that looked unbelievable.
I hit our cameras so that we could show it off. That it was fun. We had blowing up big historic images and doing some table setting for Molly House prototype development on the show floor was
Yeah.
an absolute riot. It was so fun to get a chance to do that.
And of course, we like put together, the Molly House Kickstarter. I mean, I'll say just a little bit before we get into future conventions about, you know, the work that went into Molly House. So when we talked about Molly House last year, we were almost a year into that collaboration, and we kept at it. We just kept at it and kept at it. And then in June, we met Joe at UKGE and worked out a new version of the game together, that we had been working on, kind of passing back and forth, but really found something that looked like it was going to work. And that was a version that we showed at Gen Con and that people responded to really well. And that led to the crowdfunding campaign for Molly House, which did so well, and we're so pleased with. And then we have also been like at work on Molly House. We'll talk more about that later. But one thing that we learned about our whole process is that we, as it turns out, really love going slow when we're working on games and just kind of being like grumpy, dissatisfied creative partners who always just want the games to be just a little bit better. Um, and thankfully, we have such a lovely partner in Joe, who was happy to go on the ride. So I think we went into this year not knowing, how many games are we going to get done this year, and the answer was kind of one. Um, and it took a lot of work. Pretty much all of my Whirligig time just was funneled right into working on Molly House. But the design is in such a great place.
Yeah.
And the work that we did on Molly House was greatly aided by the work travel that we did.
Yeah,
True.
every single show that we went to the last year. I mean, there was a manic month where I think there was only a handful of us, folks like us in the industry that did like 3 shows in a month. And it was a lot. It was a lot of travel, and playing, getting a chance to play those versions of Molly House strengthened the design because we were able to iterate and to better them between playing it with some really like trusted friends that live all across the world, the country.
Mm-hmm.
And that, that makes these conventions really important to us, from a development like perspective, but also it takes a community to make games, right? As much of it is like spread across whatever coasts. uh I wanted to say that, I think Cole and I are both feeling that much better about going into a year's worth of new conventions
Mm-hmm.
from both perspectives of bringing the development, playtesting copy, and to like have the design on our mind as much as ever. I still want to bring the scrappy game in my backpack, but we're now going to be boothing at, I think, all of these shows. We're going to be boothing Gamma Expo, which I've never done before. We're having uh, a lot of success in retail stores in the last few, especially in the last few months, which is something I never thought I would say.
Right.
um, and that's been really exciting that stores want to stock our games. And
Well, and that was something that we mentioned last year in our look ahead, that we were going
yeah,
to start experimenting with distribution for some of our like established games like Premiere, where we were going to see how that worked. And it turns out like it works really well. And so like distribution is not going to be something that we pursue for all of our projects, but it's been good enough that it like does make sense for us to go to Gamma and talk to more stores, because there are whole worlds of people who play these games who like really want a game like Premiere, but who aren't on a Twitch live stream in the middle of a Monday.
hey, these are my favorite times to talk with
No, it's true. Me
you.
too.
um but that's going to be an interesting like boothing experience, and I'm quite excited about it, which is fun. And also, I'm trying to also share more time with Gamma over the coming years, and it'll be good to like actually spend time at my first expo there, especially since it's in Louisville, which is pretty close. um and we're going to be boothing Gen Con and PAX Unplugged, and we will have some space at Essen. There's still a big question mark of what that looks like still, but we're going to be going to all of these shows, and it's going to be in a formal capacity, not just Cole and I
Right.
are there as to buy games.
Right. We will be at other shows. Like I'll be at Origins
Yeah,
in an informal capacity.
yeah, yeah,
But we'll not be I think trying to limit the amount of like big shows that we go to. The Yeah, and I'll say in addition to this work travel, and these are things that I'll be posting about on social media, but I'm also going to be doing a research, not a research trip, but I'll be helping run a symposium at Bowdoin College, which I will be posting about in later in April, and talking about games that ask players to do morally difficult things. And then we also, I'm doing a digital talk with the Georgetown Wargaming Group about perspective in games and how we use perspective. And then we will potentially be at one or both SD HisCons.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll be showing off Molly House this upcoming weekend at their winter event.
Quarters, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, there's going to be other ones, and I hope that we'll be able to also go to Circle DC in April.
Yes.
I have to figure that out still, travel wise. But there's a lot of good stuff. But these are the ones that like we're boothing, and going from one booth to 4 different boothing things is already like a big jump. But after being on the sidelines for years already, um, I'm feeling like I'm very comfortable actually having, I don't know, increasing our presence at a bunch of shows. So
Yeah.
it's going to be really
No,
fun.
I'm excited. Shows are great.
Shows
And
are
as
so
long as
fun.
as long as I don't travel to 6 within 2 months or whatever that stupid thing we did this
We
fall,
won't do it
I'm
again.
fine.
We won't.
And I don't think I'm doing UKGE this year, but next year.
Yeah.
I think I want to do like it and Essen alternating if I can, because I had such a good time
Yeah.
at UKG, and I definitely want to go back. I just can't go back this year.
Okay, Cole, we should move things along. Do you want to talk
Yes,
about
we got to
Molly
go.
House? Let's talk about Molly House. Let's keep this quick.
We have to talk about Molly House so we can talk about the new stuff.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to
Let's go. Let's go. Okay, so Molly House. Here's the story. We have been hard at work on this game. Basically, as soon as the crowdfunding started, we basically branched the version. Actually, it started before the crowdfunding campaign had ever begun. Because so Dan, when he published his review, and Dan and I had talked, Dan Thoreau had talked about Molly House and really liked it. Dan asked me like, "How is this game done? How close are you guys in the process?" And I said, like, Dan, you can't ask me that question. You know that I always think that I'm done, and also always know that I'm never done. But there are parts about Molly House. I did tell Dan that like I didn't really have a sense of. I knew what the design needed. I knew it wasn't done, but I didn't know what it needed. And so working with Joe and with Drew, we just kept poking on Molly House while the crowdfunding campaign was going. We were doing development, and Drew and I worked so much on Molly House, especially all the way through November. And then right at the very end of November, like days before PAX Unplugged, the thing that was holding us back from finishing the design clicked into place. And the week leading into PAX Unplugged was utterly chaotic because we were trying. I mean, we had just built this whole booth. And I remember telling Joe, like, meet me in the print shop the next morning. We're going to assemble a new copy of Molly House. And then we used PAX Unplugged to test a new branch of Molly House.
We had made such a pretty version of Molly House to show off, and Cole was like, "Actually, we should just print and playtest this new one and use this time while we have it."
Yeah.
And I'm so glad we did, Cole.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll say for folks who maybe played the backer kit version or are curious, like, what are the highlights? What are the highlights? There are basically 2. One of them is that the way the house scoring works has been made a lot more like a card game and much more open. And the biggest difference is the backer kit version. You would bring a Molly to a party, and the Molly would say, "I want a full house," and then you would try to build that full house, and you were either succeeding or failing. The new version of Molly House, the current version, you go to the party not really knowing what kind of party it's going to be. And there are more cards that have special effects that cause the actual parties to be really dynamic, where someone starts trying to build a certain kind of hand and another player kind of derails it in an exciting way. People laugh a lot more when they play this version of Molly House. It's a lot. It's just a lot more open and expressive. So that's one thing. We really worked on getting the parties right. To that end, we've been thinking about production. You'll see on that photo on the screen that we're experimenting into what does it mean to have like a little felt table that you put inside the Molly House board, so that kind of like elevates the cards in play. That was something that we started experimenting with at PAX Unplugged, and we've
Mhm.
kept experimenting with it.
And
And
also
then the
centralizing the cards in
Mhm.
play. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is one of those things that it seems. I showed it to some of my colleagues here at Leader Games, and they were like, "Why do you need this little table? Why don't you just play in the middle of the board?" And I was like, it's about a vibe, but also it's incredibly useful to elevate the cards just a little bit. And I've been just so happy with how it's worked. And I have a meeting today with our production manager at Panda, who is we're gonna talk about felt tables.
Yeah.
So that was like bucket one. And then bucket two was that Joe came up with a brilliant new informant house loyalty system that fixed a bunch of kind of long-standing issues with the design. And it was one of those things that Drew and I, we were working on some part of the design. I was very like harried and tired. And Joe, like while I was trying to get ready to publish a new edition of the game on the weekend, Joe was like, "Hey, here's my like suggestion." He's talking, they were showing it to other folks in the Discord, and they were having a nice chat about it. And I just kept thinking, like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? I'm trying to finish this game. And then when I calmed down and I looked at their suggestion, it was great. It's great. And
Yeah.
it does so much amazing work for the design, where you really feel just torn apart while you're playing it. It's wonderful. And I'll say there was a lovely little side thing that happened, which is Drew and I we were playing. We learned about this card game called Surfasaurus Max, which is it's sort of similar to my house in the sense that you're building collective poker hands, and it had this rule that says you're allowed to talk about your hands. And we started playing with it. We were like, we've never allowed players to talk about their hands, really just out of a sense of propriety, right?
Mhm.
Card games, you don't talk about your hand. But we realized that, like, actually, Molly House is better when you're allowed to talk about your hands. And the conversations about your hands are so tortured because there are things you want to tell people, but you can't tell them because them knowing it might hurt you.
Yeah.
And it just the last like 5 games of Molly House I've played have been my favorite games of it that I've ever played.
Yeah.
And
The parties are so much more emotional, but also like player driven, and have some really fun emergent properties as they relate to like your position across the arc of Molly House too.
right.
So the game has like a really wonderful curve now, but
Yeah.
also more importantly that it sharpened a lot of the tensions that players are feeling when they're thinking about their own reputation, about how close they are to a particular constable during the party, and when that's going to get resolved. Yeah, it's
So
yeah, we're really happy with this current branch.
yeah, what we're doing now for Molly House, by the way, is basically, Ricky and Rachel, Ricky doing the solo and Rachel doing the art, have kind of been on hold. They've been kind of off stage. And the design is very so what we're doing right now, before I bring them back in, is we're doing this really exhaustive um we're doing this really exhaustive usability review where I'm basically looking at weird old parts of the design where I'm like, oh, this rule was really important at one point. It's not important anymore. So, like long-standing elements of the design, certain things that even people on the testing Discord haven't seen yet, where, for instance, like for a long time, the cards that you played, that you scored, would be stored in your player area as a kind of reputation. What we realized as we played it more is like, actually, if we just had a little reputation track on the board, it could hold that same information or a similar kind of information. And that allows us to move the cards a little bit more. And then we've just been doing things that have been kind of like sharpening the spatial play, reorganizing the board a little bit. So we're in a kind of a big cleanup step,
Yeah.
but we have just come to a good agreement with the artist for the art schedule. And Rachel is going to get plugged into doing like all the board art and stuff very soon. Um, so, over the next, I would guess that this game is going to be done within about 3 months. We are getting close. And I'm hoping to, I think that we're probably maybe 2 or 3 weeks away from doing a public PNP that won't have like final art or anything, but it will be like fully featured. And then once we do that public PNP, Ricky will be plugged back into the solo stuff. We'll start getting art, and then we're just finishing the game.
Yeah.
So Molly House, in short, is in just it's in a great spot. And it was a classic instance. And I saw Chief's comment, like how weird, how upsetting it is. The game got better so fast. And I just want to underline it because that is something that happens. And I don't know if it's just my development practice or just how all games are. Molly House was a difficult project because we were like imagining it. We were after something and we couldn't quite get it to hit it. And then we got it to the, it was like a low B or a mid B, like a very good game. Very proud of it. And that was enough that I felt comfortable like taking it to a broader audience, sending it to reviewers. And now we are like in A territory. Like it is leveled up so dramatically where I told her, I'm like, I think this might be my favorite historical game that I've ever helped work on because it is so playful and it has
Well, the game
a
also got
scary amount of
wildly
depth.
strategic. Yeah, I got so deep in the last few months, and like I don't want to sell my like the work short comparing it to other versions that were like hinting at it, but I think a lot of play has gotten very strategically. I think the level of complexity that we've been looking or like tiptoeing around, and now that we're owning it with some of the mechanics a bit more, have been really nice. And it's meant that the weight of the game has like gone up a little bit. There's like more to think about, but it's still less than Premiere, right?
I think it's a little less than Premiere. If I had to say that, like, if Premiere's complexity, let's say, is a 3 out of 5, I think Molly House is like a 2.8 or something. It's like a little less. One person in the comments mentions like what are the things that we're still like, disappointed in. A lot of it is like integer balancing. Like, are the constables a little too fast? Or are they a little too slow? Like that is the stuff that I'm like, is it too difficult to accuse? Is it too easy to accuse? And there's a big, if you would have asked me this question a week ago, I would have had a much longer list, but we had a very, very good work session over the weekend that cleaned up my concern list. So I'm sure that I will find things to be worried about in Molly House, but I'm not going to find out till this weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. And
okay. So that's
and
Molly House.
And all of this work is to say, that it's also looking like the production, the design, now that it's cleaned up a bit more, has meant that this production, like, we're not going to have to like change prices or anything like that. The development and the logistics end of things are still looking like really, really healthy, which is great, because we kind of afforded that there were going to be some added components into this game, and I'm really happy that all of the last 3 months have very much fallen within the project's budget. And
we put a little bit of padding that we didn't know exactly what was going to happen to that padding, and I'm so happy we did.
We've done this before. This before, and also we know ourselves pretty well enough too.
Sure.
Cole, any last thoughts about Molly House so we can keep moving?
No, it's really in a good place. If you haven't played in a while and you're curious, I would really recommend waiting like one more week before you like hop in the Discord. Folks who are playing already in the Discord, great. Very happy to receive your game reports. It's just, I think that this weekend or sometime this week, I'll be posting a newer version with a lot of the usability improvements that I think folks are going to like. Because it just cleans up some stuff that just doesn't need to be as messy as it is.
And we'll put a bigger update too on our BackerKit followers about the like the PNP release when we do the next build too, right? Okay, let's
go to the future.
Let's talk about the future. Cole, what's happening?
Infamous Traffic. It's happening. I am rereading my sources right now, and I have it set up at my house. Basically, with Molly House stabilized, I am committing to this being my next project for sure. There is a question about scope. So previously, what has happened with it? So here's what happens with the second editions, just so people know my process. First thing that we do is we play the second edition a lot, and I got to get mad at it. I got to be like upset with the game and disappointed in myself for having even done it. And then when I'm in that mode, when I'm upset at the game, that's when I make my list of like, these are the things that I want to make better. With Infamous Traffic, we have tried it twice, and we will set it up and we'll play it, and Drew and I will find ourselves liking the design as it is. And I'm like, that is not exciting enough. That's not going to put the fire in my belly. That's going to make me want to build a dang second edition
Yeah.
for this game. So I have set it up again, and I have a very narrow list of issues. And I haven't quite figured out the right way to express them, but I'll riff a little bit and see if I can get there. Infamous Traffic, I think, is oftentimes better if during the first decade, the first kind of game turn, players play poorly. If you play with a player who's bad at the table and you got to make mistakes and play very like fast and loose in that very first decade, the rest of the game is much more interesting. And if you play conservatively, which often good play dictates you should play conservatively in Infamous Traffic on the first decade, the game is less interesting. And that to me is kind of a problem. It's a place where the design isn't living up to its promise. So I want to fix that. I also think the game has some odd player count issues where there are certain player counts that just aren't as good as other player counts. And then I think that the rule book could use a lot of work. And I think that there are some elements of the game's physical production that could use some work to make the game a little easier to do. So what I've done is I'm basically convinced that, or not convinced, I am committing to the fact that if I can't figure out how to make this game better, I can at least put it back into print because
Yeah.
people want it. When I was talking to Amabel many years ago about this, I really thought that I would be able to publish it within just a year or so of getting it back. And it turns out John Company took like 4 times longer than I thought. And
Right.
it took,
Right.
and Molly House took twice as long.
Yeah.
And so what I've committed to with Drew is that I will have a second edition of this game like ready for Drew's approval and everything by the end of the year. It is the product I'm working on as Molly House winds down. And I'm gonna be able to finish it.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about it. So if you follow me on the various platforms, I will be posting about my progress and thinking about Infamous Traffic. I'm going to spend a lot of time watching games of Infamous Traffic and just kind of thinking about ways to improve it. Um, my guess is that there is a chance, or here's what I'll say. There is a chance that this is a significantly less ambitious second edition than the other ones that we've undertaken. And the reason why I say that, I think what generally happens is I say that, and then when I play the game, I realize how wrong I am. And that is certainly the pattern of Pamir and the pattern of John Company. But as I've played more Infamous Traffic, I find myself continuing to say that. So it's my hope, it's my promise to try to get this game in print for you all as soon as I can. I want a really beautiful, functional production. Um, and it is going to be my like number one task as Molly House winds up.
Yeah.
So I'm basically working on it now.
Yeah. And it has a lot of interesting questions from a logistical side as well.
Yes.
That also need sorted out sort of in conjunction.
Yep. And that things that we've hinted at before, and we'll talk a little bit about later. Someone asked about the Molly House metal miniatures, which I really appreciate you asking me. We are basically, I'm waiting until this usability pass is locked in,
Right.
because there are like 2 outstanding questions about what the player pieces need to do, and we have to answer those before we commission any sculpts. And I know this is taking so long, and I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
My
But
current sense of the styles that we're going to go with like pedestal busts. But it's, this is something that I want. So here's why it's taking a long time. One, there's a development question. The second question is, I want Rachel as the kind of lead artist to be able to look at the board and look at the cards and look at all the pieces and say, the player figurines should be in this style. And so until we can do that, I don't feel super comfortable.
which is to say, again, we're leaning on our own willingness to be patient and asking the patience of others to say this game would be more cohesive if more of it was in a similar hand, and through the same lens. and I think the game's presentation will be that much stronger for it. And I don't want folks to be purchasing something that is misrepresentative of what they get. So this is why we're also holding it close to the chest.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, so for example, the mini table that we showed on top of on the Molly House board, we've had that mini table for 2 months, but we've been very reluctant to show it because I want to make sure that it's the right thing. And even now, like we haven't even updated the backer kit backers with the Molly House folding table because I want to be really sure before I show them because I don't want people to get people's hopes up.
And what we're here to say is we are very, very sure now. Yeah, it's going to be an incredible table. It's it's also one of the things where I can't wait for folks to see it in play in person. And it looks gimmicky, but it's also one of those usable objects.
It
Yeah,
is
it's a
so
treat.
usable.
Such a
I would
treat.
not like I really I think aesthetics are important, vibes are important, but I don't want to do anything that would make the game harder to play, and the
Yeah.
table makes the game so much easier to play.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
so anyway,
Back to
that's it.
traffic.
That's it. Yeah, back traffic. Excited. I'm pumped. It's not the only historical thing I'm working on right now, and I guess I mean now's a good time for me to say too that I am finally so my two big Whirligig projects this year are traffic and I guess finishing Molly House. That's primary thing one. And then traffic is primary thing two. And then the third thing is finally getting the reconstruction game together, which I don't mind talking about, which it makes sense to kind of talk about here in a little bit. I think, Drew.
Yeah, maybe now is actually a decent time to mention it, just because if folks hadn't seen, there's a great Slate profile call where it is the first thing mentioned, and it would be hard not to want to address it now.
Uh, yeah, yeah. Sorry, someone asked. Nick asked a great question. If we're losing the "and" from the title from an infamous traffic, I don't think so.
There's still only one.
So the reconstruction game I've been working on for a long time. Oh no, actually, let me rewind.
No.
So in my day job at Leader, which is where I'm broadcasting from, I do a lot of design collaboration. I am sometimes lead on a job, and sometimes I'm just a member of a development team. And I love game development. I really do. It's one of my favorite parts of my job, but I love design more. And so what I am finding is I should be applying my time a little bit more to design than to development. So this past year, I tried to help develop a lot of different historical games. And I think some of them we talked about in last year's look ahead, and some of them we didn't talk about, but I still worked on. And my time with Molly House became a lot more fruitful when that relationship turned into a co-design for everyone. And I was a better developer when I was further into it. So for this year, what I'm going to be doing is doing less development on other titles and instead just kind of getting back to basics. And so to that end, finishing Molly House with Joe, having a lovely time doing it. Traffic is just something I'm going to be working on kind of by myself. And then the reconstruction game, which I've been teasing for a long time, I think I'm finally ready to tackle. I finished reading Eric Foner's reconstruction book a little bit ago for the second time, and so it's kind of in my head. And then what has happened with the reconstruction game is every once in a while I would put together the concepts into something like a game proposal, and I was always really disappointed with the parameters of the proposal. It was always kind of too small. And what I think I finally have a framework for telling the story of reconstruction, and I have kind of like two different reconstruction proposals that I'm working on right now. One of them is more war gamey, like almost hex encountery, and the other one is much more like a PAX game. And I don't know which one is the more appropriate one yet, but I'm sorting through that. One of them is also a very large scale, like you'll get a big map of the postbellum South. another one is just a map of Louisiana. And these kind of like, so basically I've narrowed the Reconstruction game down to basically two really important questions. Do I want to build more of an operational war game that focuses on the logistical and political dimensions to the actual like military conflict? And this is being inspired by, I recently read, sorry, I have to look up this author's name. Oh my gosh. I promised I wouldn't do this on
Oh.
stream. I got it. This is inspired by a recent reading of John Patrick Daly's The War After the War, which is a fascinating history of Reconstruction that is not social or political. It's like Reconstruction is just a war, and we should understand it as a war. And it's fascinating. And so I have a version of it that I'm like, oh, you could do a Reconstruction game that was an almost operational scale hex encounter game. The other version of the Reconstruction game is a much more paxy and is much more interested in the biracial coalition, the Southern Democrats, the white supremacists, and kind of the different parties that were making different kinds of political gambits with the system. So I think I have to make a decision about which style of game to work on. But even though that sounds like a huge decision, I promise you it is so much narrower than any of the other frames that I have had on this project for the past like 6 years that I've been stewing on it. The other question is scale and scope, which is I think that there's a world where to do the subject right, I kind of want to tell the whole story of Reconstruction and have a big, again, the big map of the South, and cover all the states. There's another version of this game that just looks at Louisiana over a period of, let's say, 16 years and kind of starts in like 65 and goes to 77 or something.
We like a microcosm, Cole.
Because as I have gotten deeper into the specific history of Louisiana in the context of Reconstruction, I'm like, well, all the notes are here.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit like in Pamir, I wanted to do a game about like borderlands and 19th century empire. But Afghanistan isn't the whole story. It's just one part of it. And I started as I've been reading more deeply into Louisiana state history, I'm like, oh, actually Louisiana might be the best case study for talking about how all these things go. So thanks, Martin. That's the sense of where I'm at here with the Reconstruction game. So again, going back to it, I'm finishing Molly House. I'm working on Traffic. I'm also finally like assembling the materials for the Reconstruction game. So by this time next year, I would love to be able to tell you guys like, hey, thank you for supporting Infamous Traffic. It's going great. We're almost done. And now I'm getting ready to turn myself fully over into the Reconstruction game. That's kind of where I want to be if we're still in the mode of the New Year's resolution. I don't know if I'm going to be there. I'm slow at this. It takes me a long time to work on these games, but those are my ambitions.
And also we're afforded like seeking out our ambitions because folks support us directly. Yeah. So again, are you tired of me saying thank you? Hopefully.
No, this is Drew and I grew up watching a lot of public broadcasting, so and I just want to say it's the generous support of viewers like you.
Okay, Cole, but let's talk about new games and our last thing that we'll talk about today. Sound good?
Yeah. Well, not the last, but the last few slides.
The last. Let's we need an update. We're still working with the 1819 Singapore folks. Over the last year, we've been meeting with them almost on a monthly basis, working on their design, kind of like closely with them. And it's been a fascinating like design and development period with this game. Where should we go?
Well, I mean, I'll say just a very little bit about this, which is I have really liked this collaboration because it's been very different from our other collaborations. Right. So many of our other collaborations are like, we want to help you. We're going to get right in the weeds with you. With the 1819, they have a big staff of people working on this project, and not staff, and they're all volunteers, but there's a big group, big creative team. And we've been more like, treat us as a resource. We will help you. But this is their own baby. And it's starting to make some real movement and like movement
Yeah.
towards publication, which is exciting. I don't know how long it's going to take them. One thing that I underline every time I have a meeting with them is like, look, do right by your game. If that means you need extra time, you just take the extra time. There's no reason to rush it in particular. But I didn't want folks to like this is ongoing. And we have a bunch of other ongoing projects that we're not going to really mention, including like Sacred Band, which like there's been progress. Things are still moving there. They're just moving kind of at their own pace. We wanted to flag this one because a lot of folks know about the existence of this game because of its life as an art installation, and it's still something that we would love to publish, and we're still trying to help them get across the finish line. But it will be done when this group says it's done. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, I think there's a world where within the next few months they might be seeking playtesters on the Whirligig and Friends Discord. So know that like there will be more specifics about this project coming up.
Yeah, maybe we'll leave it right there. But this is for our time. This is like a spring and summer project that we want to continue cooking on. But in a really interesting way where I'm just glad that there's still movement and that there's still been a desire to get this thing into its like most realized version goal. Um, okay, but I'm trying my best to keep this less to an hour.
Yeah. Let's go.
Let's talk about the announcement. We are going to be publishing Hellraisers in Kanawha County, which is, I'm actually going to slide you down so we can see everything. We'll be down here.
Get me out of here.
We'll be down here. We'll be down here. This is a game that really took us by surprise when we checked this out last year, and has like we have been absolutely enamored with the design, and it's been incredible working with Matilda and Luke over the last few months. And this is a project where it'll be our first foray into American history games. Its framework is it's operating in a PAX like style tableau building game, but its vision is exceedingly clear about it putting players into competing coal companies, into a couple of coal companies that are fighting for profits, while also another player acting as the labor movement that is organizing and activating strikers to get their demands through for what feel like basic rights.
Right.
It is a 1 to 3. Again, that's where development is going to take us to bringing this out and fleshing out some of the ideas in this game to make it
Yeah.
really stable and working at all player counts. And this will be our first project where we're bringing in Joe Schmidt as a developer, working alongside me and Cole on this project. But really, we're going to be waving the flag and getting this towards like production ready. But this is the next thing, Cole.
And I'll say,
go ahead.
it was. I mean, there's so much to say about this game. So I'm a big fan of Matilda's work, and Matilda and Luke's work on this particular title was always really good. And it has like from the very first time that I played it, the concept of like this is a pack style game, but two players are running businesses and another player is playing labor, and this sort of like asymmetric PAX like it was just instantly like a compelling idea. And then one thing that happened when we were looking at this title is you know we didn't know who the right development partner would be for it. And I like this is the kind of thing that in another world, if I didn't have my plate full, I would have loved to have developed this title and really worked on it. And Joe, who we had gotten to know through Sacred Band, and who like Drew and I think our first time hanging out with Joe is probably playing his upcoming game, Henry, the new campaign and levy game. I was just so impressed with like Joe's design thinking. And it occurred to me that like this was a pretty clear match of a developer and a design team and a kind of general subject. And it's a subject that Drew and I are deeply passionate about. And I think there are lots of like outstanding questions about how this game is going to look. And it's questions about precise player count and all that little stuff. Like, what does it mean to scale? That whatever. But we've got a good team together for it, and I can't wait to show folks more of it. It also, I will say, like we our little weird historical game company is something that we're all still learning what it is. And I was thinking about this, Drew, in the context of your observation that Molly House had gotten a little bit heavier
Yeah.
because it had started. I mean, there were points when we were working on the development of Molly House where I would ask Drew, like, is this just like a card game that we've bloated into a board
Right.
game?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and what we realized as we worked on Molly House was like, no, like there's actually a natural weight and length to the kind of games that we really love that we want to see made. And that's something like a little bit lighter than a PAX Premiere and 60 to 90 minutes. And this is us kind of expanding that a little bit on the lower side. I think this game is going to be simpler and a little bit shorter than something like Premiere, but it's also not going to be that different.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, yeah, it's one, knowing that is we really want to keep it to these like a smaller player counts. And there's also a world where development leads us into reckoning that this game might just be a 3-player only game. But I'm currently really optimistic that we'll get it working at 1 to 2 as well. But it's really I don't know if there was ever a game that was going to take us into into American history, and maybe this doesn't feel like we're starting in like a new line or anything like that. It feels like it's also of all of our titles too, so it feels like it's on brand for a lot of like ostensibly speaking, but there's a lot for us to explore in terms of just again the experiment of this upcoming year is to seeing like, all right, do we like working on titles like this? Because if after a couple years from now, we get to kind of decide the shape of these collaborations,
Right.
which has me really, I want to keep my ears open and my heart open to knowing what is our best like design practice, whether that's working with like new partners, elevating new voices, especially new games that I wouldn't have come up, we wouldn't have come up with this particular game on our own. So it's really excited to kind of help expand historical gaming right now with such a compelling title.
Yeah.
And I do want to shout out Kevin Bertram with Port Circle, who was like a part of also early collaborating around finding a home for this game too. And hopefully I'll bring it to Circle DC and we'll get a chance to talk about it over there too later in April. But yeah, I'm really thrilled about everyone that's been helping get this game made. Yeah, and more on this to come. This is we're gonna have all sorts of the aesthetic dream for this game too is also very exciting, and I think the production is, we have some exciting ideas that are floating around right now around it, but we'll keep this in, like, know that we're working on this game. It's very early days, but consider it signed and in the production timeline.
Yep. I can't wait. And so I think, if you're asking yourself like, well, what's like the next big project from Wehrlegig going to look like? What's our next crowdfunding campaign? I'm going to hope Traffic, but there's a world where it's like Traffic and Hellraisers, or we just do a little Hellraisers and then Traffic. I mean, so something like that. We don't have hard and fast rules. We will wait till the games are done, then we'll show them. Someone mentioned Persuasion. Persuasion is like technically still on our desk. We do this thing where we're not interested in like signing games too quickly. So, Zoe and I have talked about Persuasion a few times, and I've actually talked about Persuasion with a few other publishers too, where I think there's a right way to do it, and I don't know the way to do it is what the way to do it is. So I'm always kind of like, I'm always open to ideas. It's something that I think is really special. I'd be honored really to publish it. But to everything there's a season, right? So like it's just not. It didn't feel like quite the right thing for us right now. And if you're interested in Persuasion, I think that there's a PMP for it. You can play right now.
Yeah, both it and Hellraisers are on Screentop, and so those builds are stable and good. And please check them out. You'll see what delighted and sparked Cole and I's interests in those builds as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Cole, our plates are full.
They're
Our
full.
plates are
It's so
full.
funny because all that's ringing in my mind are the games that we haven't talked about that we have like looked at or worked on or thought about. And I'm like, well, we got plenty to think
We
about
have
right now.
yeah, which is to say, our cups are right at the brim. I'm not gonna say they're overflowing, but they are right
No.
at the brim. They're good.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
just, it's a real pleasure and privilege to have such a lovely set of worthwhile projects, worthy projects for us to spend our time on.
Yeah.
I can't underline that enough that like so I do my Wehrlegig week, today, exempting things like today, mostly during lunch breaks and on the weekends. And, Saturday morning I get up and make a cup of tea and I'm always so happy to spend some time doing research or working on the designs or in a play test or things like that. I mean, these are projects that really animate me, even when I'm exhausted in other ways. But there's always so much to explore and to learn.
and a lot of that is again the backers that are giving us energy to do this thing too. So know that like every single comment and pledge and everything else like just makes us want to get up and do this all over again.
Right, because the big lesson from this last year, the headline was, we don't need to make games about guns and boats. We don't have to. Like that was, I can't remember whose comment that was Nick or Dan Bullock said that, right? Like, Molly House is the first game that doesn't have any armament in it.
Yeah.
And that's true, and it's tremendously exciting.
There's also guns are quite important in Hellraisers.
Oh, they're going to be real important. So and the Reconstruction game's got lots of them. But I love that I can stumble into down a little history rabbit hole, or we can play a prototype from a new designer who's attacking a really interesting subject and think like, yeah, we could make a game about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all super exciting.
Yeah. What is next? What's next on the immediate is a backer kit update will be coming out. Updated print and play files.
Yeah, probably within 2 or 3 weeks, I would say.
Yeah, and then gosh, I think I get to come up to St. Paul to do more testing in February, and then the Gamma Expo where we'll have a nice print and play to bring to that convention will be in March. So yeah, good stuff on the near horizon as well. This is true, Matilda. Yes.
Yeah, one of the Hellier suits, literally guns. There's no getting around it.
Yeah. Okay, Cole, let's sign off there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Hit us up with your questions, of course. Thank you so much for spending some time with us on this lovely Monday, and hopefully we will talk to you all soon.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Give me a second.